It's Josh, your Goth Fragrance Bestie. I believe perfume is a language that speaks to us, not in words and colors, but in emotions and memories. In Goth Fragrance Dialogues, we will be listening to the people who channel and craft that language for us. In this episode of Goth Fragrance Dialogues, while in New York, I stopped by to see Noah Virgil of Amphora Parfums.
So, hi Noah, thanks for allowing us today.
Thank you for coming and interviewing me.
Before we get into all the questions I have for you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Noah. I'm originally from Boston. I have two older brothers. My parents are still together. Love them very much. They're lovely and amazing. While talking about myself, who am I? What have I done? I guess I'll talk about how perfume happened. That I originally went to school for musical theater and spent a really long time acting professionally, and actually had done it for about a decade until I discovered that I didn't actually really love working with the people that were in the industry, and I decided to pivot to doing something where I could work by myself. So I guess I prefer at heart from Boston with a small family and a lot of cousins.
And what is your first memory tied to scent?
Very easily, my mom, the very first fragrance that I have a distinct memory of is Alien, and I will always remember smelling Alien on her for the very first time. Is locked into my brain, and now I collect Alien.
Oh, excellent! Like all the flankers.
Oh, well, the flankers. I don't like misuse over. On the Zombie Wing, there's a little display right next to us of all of my Alien flankers.
Excellent. So you mentioned in your about me on your website that your fascination on fragrance are of the young age, and you're particularly influenced by another's perfume, like Alien. Yeah. How did that kind of then inform the shift from the acting and creative space into perfumery?
It's so interesting because I'd always been really interested in, I guess, in the beauty space, even when I didn't really necessarily know what that was as a third grader. But I've always been really fascinated by aesthetics and by the idea of what we use to make ourselves feel the most like ourselves. And so that's always been sort of in the background with me my entire life, and it very much influenced who I was as a performer. And so all throughout my time performing, it was very much centered in self-expression and helping people, showing things that weren't normally shown on stage. And so as I got older and started to need to actually think about it as a career and decided what I wanted to do full time, I realized that I needed more space to be able to actually execute my creative whims without having to rely on so many other people.
All right. And as you transition kind of this passion and focus on aesthetics and expression into a career with Amphora, what are some kind of pivotal moments that made that happen?
It's so funny. Amphora happened kind of randomly. Either way, the way that I got into perfumery officially, I looked up the day before you got here because I wanted to make sure I knew it. I think I took my first perfumery class at the Institute for Olfaction online in November of 2023. So I'd always known about fragrance and been involved in the fragrance world and had a lot of opinions and feelings about different fragrances. And I was also the type of person who despite being really interested in beauty and interested in aesthetics, I was never super into social trends of beauty, not for any particular reason. That was really my world. Being from theater, it was much more about self-expression than it was about, at least the first people that I interacted with doing theater. Can't say the same for everybody, but it was much more about self-expression than it was about like fitting into a mold. That changed. But at the beginning, I was very, very aware of that. And so when I was going into perfume, picking them for myself, it was never about necessarily like finding, the beast mode fragrance or like even necessarily looking at the things that were the most popular. So I was very much guided by my own nose, which is what made me decide to start making perfume, because I didn't realize, I just didn't know what went into it. I didn't realize that it was basically just chemistry, which I always enjoyed in high school anyway. And once I started getting my hands on some real ingredients, it became really clear to me that there was a much bigger world in perfume that I just never been exposed to, and that was not easily accessible, that I wanted to challenge myself to help sort of bring into the mainstream. And I wound up posting on Instagram one day to like a bunch of my friends, just asking if anyone wanted to try some some weird set that I made just as a tester, and I got enough responses that I didn't actually have enough ingredients to make enough, and it literally just started from there. It started truly just from I think I can make something weird that no one smelled before, and it's like a perfume, but it's a bunch of ingredients that I can detect on mainstream shelves. And then I didn't realize that so many other people also had the same interest, and so it just sort of spiraled.
Excellent.
Weirdly.
Well,
Truly, it happened so slowly, but also so fast. It's really hard to describe. The initial building of my library happened in probably the span of 2 or 3 months, because I just got obsessed. If I wanted to take classes, I wanted to learn about it, you have to buy the ingredients. And so I just wanted to sell everything. And it wasn't that expensive to get, a really small amount of some raw ingredient and then dilute it. And, I've got the dilutions for at least a year. So that's at least a year's worth of being able to smell something or even put it on myself at a Cologne concentration, because I'm not personally scared of unintentionally giving myself an allergic reaction, because I'm not gonna sue myself. But being able to smell and had access to all of those ingredients was so important, not even from a making standpoint, but just from a standpoint of being able to understand scent as a whole, that I sort of turned around one day and realized that I had this entire library of scents, and then if I wanted to start putting stuff together myself, I had more than enough options. And so I just kind of decided to start putting stuff together myself.
Gotcha. That's how a lot of the perfumers are doing it now. So when you mentioned the training with the Street of Art and Olfaction, how did that kind of influence you from I'm interested in this, I think I can make this, to I'm going to make this and it's going to be a business?
Man, great question. Because how? I started with all the basics of IAO, which I would say was probably the most important thing that I did. I didn't dive into going to perfumery as anything other than a really passion hobby. I was feeling I had just come off of doing a bunch of really huge acting gigs and wasn't feeling as fulfilled as I thought I would, and just was surrounded by people that I wasn't particularly enjoying spending time around, and I just wanted something else to do. And perfume was something I could do totally by myself. I could take classes online. Originally I wanted to do it because there's a program actually runs around here, I think at Pratt they do there's a whole it's a couple months long, and it's a whole certification course that I was initially planning on doing that. And then I discovered IAO. And once I discovered IAO, I just really fell into all of their education. They focus really heavily on getting people to understand how scent works and how to apply it yourself creatively. And they do a really interesting, subtle job of teaching you how to keep yourself organized and being efficient with your ingredients in a way that makes it so that when you want to transition into making things for other people, you have all of that built up already. And it doesn't feel like quite so much of a big shift. Like, really, the only thing that majorly changed from making formulas for myself to making formulas for other people was scale. And that was, which is to say, that is a huge learning curve. Probably the biggest learning curve was figuring out how to like make more than one bottle of things, because then it is just a completely different beast. But the education at IAO really just kind of sets you up to be able to succeed if you want to. And I mean, for the most part, a lot of my classmates were, I want to say, either people who already worked in fragrance in some capacity or people who just really like fragrance. I didn't actually have any plans to start rambling around, just wanted to understand more. And that, I think, was also a really important factor, was not being surrounded by a bunch of people with the exact same goal. That it was a lot of people who all wanted to learn about the same thing, but I don't think a single person that took my group of classes has had the same like career trajectory since. Even if they are working in fragrance, that we've done totally different things. And I think that like having the different voices, it just sort of makes you feel like you've gotten more of an outside perspective. It doesn't feel quite so much like a weird little like feedback loop. You actually feel like you're getting some outside perspective that allows you to have much more confidence transitioning into like a real business than if you were to just be doing it with a lot of people who were all trying to build the same thing, and there was like a sense of competition.
Right. Before we transition into kind of more the focus of the brand, can you talk a little bit about who your least favorite celebrity is and why?
Not great. I'm like, get those clicks. Like, well, I mean, honestly, in 2025, it's pretty easy. I was like, I could pick out 10 more names. Honestly, probably be totally fine on TikTok.
So you've described Amphora Perfume as a love letter to the unanswerable. Aiming to use scent as a medium for complex emotions is difficult, but also, I think, one of the most rewarding pieces. Can you talk a little bit about how you translate those complex emotions into scent?
I mean, Sublimate and Private Yell are like honestly just a great example for, I guess, just kind of from like my whole philosophy as it exists. The decision to create these formulas was purely out of just a like desperation for some sort of like creative release. And like I said, I just come off of doing a bunch of really, really huge gigs. One at Lincoln Summer and one at the Kennedy Center. And I was used to the pressure at that point. And I was used to feeling a significant amount of pressure and not really having a lot of opportunities for release. And I'd finally gotten these two huge opportunities, and I was still feeling all the pressure. And Sublimate came out of this feeling of just like, how is it possible that I've managed to do these things and I still feel like I don't exist? Like I've done all of the things that I said I wanted to do in my acting career, and I still don't feel like I am an actor, and how does that happen? How does something exist and not exist at the same time? And I just needed to make something about it. And it was very much sort of the same, opposite side of the same coin for Primal Yell, was that it felt like I was doing all this work and making big strides, and then I wasn't personally killing it, but it also felt like when I was screaming out to other people, no one was listening. And it was just starting to feel not pointless, but I was starting to recognize what people would and wouldn't listen to, and whether or not it was actually worth it to be screaming all the time. And I found a way for myself to put it into a set in a way that I could get people to listen to it and, really have to sit with it. Mm-hmm. It's sort of my way of just sort of pushing my emotions to people. And once I got it all out at first, it changed a lot. Once I got it all out, it very suddenly blossomed into my second launch was, I spent many, many months reflecting on as everyone does, reflecting on my childhood, but very specifically, I had spent such a long time as an adult sort of doing the thing that all adults do, and looking back and being so many things that I wish I could have done as a child, or so many things that I wish I could have done as a teenager that I just didn't do, and I started to really have just a sense of forgiveness for myself in a way that I didn't expect. That I started to really look back on who I was with a lot more empathy as an adult, and I wanted to start making things about that, about connecting with yourself, about sort of getting answers for yourself, which I think it started as, really trying to express these things that I couldn't get people to understand. And it transitioned into, I realized that people did understand, and that it was actually a lot easier to get people to understand than I thought. And that really I could take a lot bigger swings with talking about how to keep in touch with yourself.
I think that's really interesting. So your first composition, Primal Yell, was really what drew me to your brand. It was such an interesting expression of lavender, and it was very emotive and harsh in an understandable way. And then your second release, Virginal, has gin and strawberry and salt water, and it's also a very unusual kind of composition, but very different emotively. Can you talk a little bit about the story behind that one?
I love the second collection. It's so funny because, objectively speaking, I know it makes sense for myself. I never really think about my sense from, which is kind of sound terrible. I don't really ever think about them from the werewolf perspective until it's too late. Until I've already gotten so far into the concept that it's well, now I want to change, and it's, I would have to make a completely different set. So there's no point. But specifically with the second collection, it really, I was inspired by ingredients for the first collection, and was oh, I can, labdanum just immediately called out to me, and manzanite for sublimate. And with the second collection, it was much more about creating story. And for me personally, I have a huge perfume collection, shocker, and I am always going to be more likely to purchase something if I think that it fulfills its creative brief than I am to buy something that I think smells good. If I find something that I think really just if the name is right, the packaging is right, the scent is right, I kind of just can't not connect with it in a way. But I have never necessarily like been someone who super connects with like, oh my god, I love the way that smells. I need to smell it all the time. There are a handful of scents that I love that I will wear a lot, but not really. I don't usually tend to put everything on just because I want to smell nice. And so with Virgil and Baby Boy, it was the reverse of the way that I came up with Sublimate Primal Yell. If that was starting with ingredients and then putting the story together and sort of finding that expression, I just started entirely with thinking about the story and a concept for notes, and then started doling out the actual accords once I came up with like a really solid concept.
Okay.
And that
It's the reverse of the first process.
pretty much. I mean, now it's sort of blended, but it feels a little bit more even. But I had sort of the thing that I was the least confident about in the first launch was that people would understand. I guess that doesn't even really need quotes. Just literally that people would understand what I was going for. And once it was clear that people did, and I didn't feel like I was hammering people over the head with it, I felt much more okay about hammering people over the head and being like, okay, so this is about me and this is how it is about my life. And that, I don't know, it felt just as freeing as doing the first collection for a completely different reason. And now I feel like I've sort of figured out my happy balance as I'm going into like my next scent.
Excellent. You use the term gay-hearted fragrance as being central to the brand.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on what that means to you and how it influences your creations?
So gay art fragrance is made up. Completely made up. It is a random piece of text from a calligraphy class that my grandma took in college. It's actually on display, I think, in my front hall. That she did a bunch of little like phrases in calligraphy, and when my mom and I were going through her archive of work, like probably 10 years ago, I went through and framed a lot of her stuff, and I had a framer do a like whole layout of all of her different text pieces, and Get Harder Fragrance is one of them. And I knew from my initial launch that I was going to be using, so the Amphora is a literal piece of art. The author who wrote Strega Nona, Tony Capella, was friends with my grandma, and so they at some point had done some sort of art swap where she gave him a piece of pottery and he gave her a painted Amphora. And so that was the piece that I had digitized and then turned into my logo. And as I was talking with my friend Evie, who did the initial digitizing, I was sending them pictures of all the other art that my grandma had done, because it's everywhere all over my apartment. And I had sent the picture of Getting Out of Fragrance, and we both just sort of like stopped and looked at each other and were like, that's it.
The moment of like synchronicity.
Yeah, like
Regardless of why your grandmother made that, it's now.
it was like, oh, that's the brand. It's Gay Heart Fragrance. It means exactly what it says. It's a very, very intentional double entendre. It like the most obvious it could possibly be. And like, I am a queer perfumer, and to me, perfume is so much about, I don't want to say joy, because that's not necessarily what I mean, because there are so many beautiful perfumes. I mean, in my opinion, some of the best perfumes about loss and tragedy. But there's something about perfume that there is a freedom in the self-expression.
Yes.
And that sort of, when I think about at least queerness now, as opposed to like, gang as in jolly, but now queer being the replacer word for it and really being the more like 2025 word, it's both about, the lifestyle, but it's also about this freedom of self-expression and like the embracing of not having a defined box to fit into. And gay-hearted fragrances, it's literally that. It's about me being gay, and also finding that freedom in fragrance, and just finding those that you want to wear because you want to wear them, and not for any other reason. Basically.
Oh, so as a queer and gender inclusive fragrance house, what are some of the challenges you faced in an industry that's often dominated by the more traditional norms? And how have you kind of navigated that route where it's not only is the self-expression and the queerness core to you and your values, but to the brand itself?
Man, I mean, it's really interesting for me because despite my background being in performing, I have always done things on the side. I have always been either politically or socially involved, or in some way involved in other things that weren't just theater, because I liked having that sort of experience. And it made me very aware of how the world was very fast and very early. And the reason that I fell in love with theater was because initially I really loved the idea of being able to work through those issues on stage and show people how those things could be overcome and how people like come together in that way. And as I got older and started to realize how much more and more complicated the world is, it just started to become really clear to me that like I needed to be able to carve out a space for myself to be able to say what I wanted to say in the way that I wanted to be able to say it. There is so much space for self-expression in the world, but there is so little for people who don't have the wherewithal to do it on their own. And that, I think, is harder and harder as someone who luckily was like half raised on social media, because it like came up as I was getting older, that like the idea of being a social creature now is essential. Like you can't, the idea of being like a hermit in this day and age is like, how would you even take yourself offline? Like, how would you get yourself off the grid? And so I have been always the type of person who is like, we live in a society. Like, we live in a society. We are always, even if we are at home, no matter what we're doing, we are always operating within it. I mean, it couldn't be a more salient time to be talking about it, but like, we are always living amongst the circumstances that are happening to us. And the perfume world is, as someone who came from the acting world, it's the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing that I see in in all of the creative industries that I've been into. And so it really, when I went into perfume, there was a very intentional decision to not necessarily ignore it, but to basically say, I don't care. Which is something that I never really had the confidence to do before, especially not as a performer. But I don't think I would still be making perfume if I had started worrying about whether or not I was going to be valued because of who I am. I think I know, or I mean, I don't have a new idea right now, so I guess I don't know, but I knew that I had great ideas that I could execute. Who knows if they'll come up in the future. But they didn't, so hallelujah for exact true. I got at least 4, so did it. It's real fun. Accepted. But it always was such a like. There were only 2 options. Either I acknowledge that this is the way that it is and resign myself to it, or acknowledge that this is the way that it is and tell myself that I don't care and that I will operate the way that I want to operate. Because if I start making decisions based off of what I think other people expect the decisions I should be making are, then I'll never wind up actually doing something that I feel comfortable with. I feel very comfortable with the way that I have, sort of created this little brand for myself, and it's made it so that now as I'm adding other people into it and getting other people involved, I don't feel so scared of losing control, because that control was never in other people's hands to begin with. And it also means that now as I'm giving other people control, it's letting other people into a place where I have power, and it's shifting the dynamics in a way that whether or not people are aware of it, it automatically happens. If you invite people into your space, even if you don't think you have a space, if you invite someone in, they have to either accept or reject the invitation. And that, for me, was the starting point. It was like, people will either accept the invitation I give them to be involved with the brand, or they'll say no. And the people that say yes are more than welcome to come and be involved. And the people that say no, I can just choose to ignore it. I would not be upset about it. I'm a person, but there are so many more people that would rather be involved and that have proven to me that that power dynamic shift is possible, that it wouldn't be worth it for me to think about it any other way.
Excellent. I think it's a very similar thread to what you just were talking to, but what role do you believe scent plays in personal identity, especially within the LGBTQ plus community?
It's so funny because my personal history with scent is so, it's so loaded, which is why I wanted to be involved in the world anyway. That obviously, my first experiences with scent were like hyper feminine, but not girly, like womanly, really, powerful, sensual, like strong scents. And so my idea of scent as self-expression has always been finding something that you feel represents yourself and makes a statement about you in a way that you don't have to say it. Never necessarily on how... Yes, actually, to that point, it makes a statement about you in a way that you never necessarily have to say it, which is the same, and that applies the same way, whether you are aware of that or not aware of it. That, if you're picking a scent because it smells good and you want to smell good, it says something about you.
Right.
It does say something about you, and that's not a bad thing or a good thing. It just is what it is. And so, the idea of a scent will always represent who you are in some way, whether you're aware of it or not. But specifically for people who are looking for scent as a method of I'll say specific self-expression, that someone who's looking to evoke a mood or a feeling or a vibe, it is so much more important than I think people even really quite realize. There's been more and more of this recently, which has been actually shockingly lovely to see, that people are starting to push back on the idea of men's and women's fragrances,
right,
even in the popular sphere, which is kind of surprising. That a lot of I've seen a lot of WIWTW TikTokers who have been these are beautiful floral scents that I love. There's nothing about a flower that says anything bad gender. If you want to wear a floral scent, you can wear it. No one's stopping you.
Right.
And so it's very obvious that, scent it's both objective and subjective. There is the objectivity of the molecules are the way they are, but subjective in that it's all about how we think about it. And so for a queer person, having a scent that you feel represents something that you can't necessarily say out loud is, I mean, it's intrinsic in being able to like find that voice within yourself. I mean, I would never say that people need anything. I don't think anyone needs perfume. I don't think it's an essential. It's something that, yeah, it's not an essential, but it is important. It's something that if you are someone who is struggling to, not necessarily struggling to represent yourself, but struggling to feel like you can express that in a way, or feel like there's something that you can't say, using scent is the easiest possible way to communicate it without feeling as exposed as if you were putting on a makeup or wearing different clothes, because that feels, it's a different experience to be perceived than it is to be experienced.
It's a non-visual overt expression.
Exactly. That like and it involves interaction. People have to smell it. It's not just that they can see you from afar and judge and you're like, that's what that person looks like. It's part of the experience of actually meeting you, which again just says a lot about you right off the jump. I go and hug someone and I'm like, I know what that scent is. I go and hug someone who I know smells like Santal 33 and I'm like, yes. Or I go and smell someone and I'm like, I don't recognize what scent they're wearing. And it will, I mean, just me as a perfumer, it creates this context for me that I'm like,
It informs you.
yeah, like for myself, I don't recognize. That's someone who, has insight into something that I might not have previously known. I now know something about this person that's kind of unique and cool without them even having to say anything. They picked out a cool scent and other people don't know that it's cool, but I know it's cool. So I know this person's cool. That's like a fun little secret we have now.
I love that. So you're relatively new. Amphora is just over a year or so old. What have been some of the most rewarding pieces of doing a perfume brand?
Oh God. All of it. It like, I mean, God, it really, it has been such a world opener for me in a way that I don't think I ever could have anticipated. I don't think anyone that I knew could have anticipated, frankly. I guess I will synthesize it all down into this, which is that putting myself in a position where I am constantly thinking about storytelling and expression and not necessarily frustration with not being able to express yourself, but with a library full of materials that allow me to express whatever I want. It's helped me become a person. It's helped me establish a sense of taste and vision for myself that has ultimately turned into what the brand is. That Amphora is a representation, not necessarily of like my favorite scents for like my favorite design elements, but like of all of the things that I have gathered from learning about how to express yourself and what expression means through scent. And that has been, I mean, I can't even assign a value to that. It's like something that I genuinely never thought that I would find in my life, especially as someone who started their professional career doing something where it was entirely dictated by other people. I was completely relying on other people to say, this is a good job for you, why are you? Or, you fit well for this, we'll send you in for this. And now it's all about finding, it's so hard to explain, but it's like, it's creative instead of destructive. It's seeing something and knowing that there is a way to express it, and then slowly building your way there and feeling that sense of building as opposed to feeling like you're trying and failing. Like seeing a type, like I'll get into core every so often where I'm like, this sucks. I'm doing a bad job. But most of the time, there's a general idea that you're looking to get to, and you get closer and closer every time you adjust a formula. It's not like you learn something even when you make mistakes, especially in perfumering. Like putting in too much of the wrong ingredient can sometimes teach you way more than putting in a bunch of stuff you like. I mean, as I'm looking at like one of my little tester models that as I was doing like tests for color and new bottle shakes and stuff, but like this is blue chamomile. I hate this. I did not think I did. It's chamomile. It's like tea, sure. And because I'm an idiot sometimes, and I'm like, because I mean, when it has such a big library, you eventually start getting ingredients where you will kind of just, your brain will remember it differently than it's. But I hate it. It feels so bad. But I learned a lot just from dumping some of that into there, because I never would have realized that it basically, for me, is going to be a dye. Like, I'm probably never going to use it as a fragrance material, but it has an incredible color that like really, really can like turn a perfume blue. And my next perfume that I'm thinking about making, I wanted to be able to make it blue, but I am very opposed to adding anything into my perfumes that isn't necessary for the perfume itself. So like the idea of adding dye or anything into a perfume just doesn't really gel with me. I mean, I props to anyone that does it. Truly, I'm like, I have most of my perfumes have dyes in them, but it's not something I have any desire to deal with. I like the look of perfume juice, but it really, this sense of constructed learning is really like the big thing in perfumery that has like trickled down into my life. There's no mistake that you make that will not ultimately teach you something.
So speaking to creation and learning, looking ahead, I believe you have at least one new release coming out. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
I would love to. So I made a wedding scent for my brother last year, which was, I mean, it's somebody, I always think about things that like my brain must say, it was such a challenge. Like, it wasn't really. It was the same as making any other perfume, but it involved a lot of interaction. But that's another thing that really was like a big lesson for me, was having to, not wanted to or needing to, but having to rely on someone else for feedback because it was about them.
Right.
So I initially made a version of it that was something that I loved. Something that I was like, this is something that I would make for a wedding. This is what that is. Send it to my brother and his wife, and they were like, it's not great for us. And so what I wound up making was something completely different. It like wound up being this fresh, spicy, honey, like leathery scent that was great for their wedding, but it was not something that I would have made because I didn't have a connection to it. I didn't have a connection to like a prompt that was, making me feel anything about the particular scents that were in it. They were chosen to represent something in someone else, which was a very different challenge. If anything, a completely opposite challenge from what I usually do. And so getting that experience of like having to rework something into something completely different, it actually kind of showed me how much value there is in my old versions, as someone who is notorious for like working on things and then scrapping and being like, the final thing, let's organize it all, and then like doing all the breakdowns and having it all like very clean. that it sort of forced me to like look back at my work, because my mom had a bunch of my testers laying around at my parents' place in Boston, and she was using them, and it said, one of the versions of the wedding scent you made, I wear a lot. I don't know which one it was. And I was like, well, now I have to figure out which one it was. And now I have to figure out how to like go backtrack and remake it. And so now it has sort of become what I initially was thinking about it as being. And it's going to be I'll shout out this bakery because it's my favorite bakery. Brigadeiro on Solomon in Soho is one of my favorite bakeries of all time. They opened a little while before the pandemic, and they are delicious and they make brigadeiros, which are little like it's basically just cooked down condensed milk into like little balls of like dulce de leche chocolate, and they're amazing. And there is something about that bakery that whenever me and my mom go, it's like it's a comfort place for us. It's somewhere where like I won't necessarily like go like, oh, I have to go to Brigadeiro to get some, but if I'm like out for a walk with my mom, we'll be like, oh god, man, like, I just want to stop and get a cup of coffee. Let's like stop at Brigadeiro and then keep going on our way. And that is something that I really wanted to capture. This sense of I don't know, this sense of casual comfort. These things that just sort of warm you up and are fond memories, but aren't like so belabored. Mm-hmm. They're things that are like casual and happen in passing that are like beautiful. And I love that I'm saying this now and I'm just remembering the copy that I wrote for it, because I wrote it like a couple days ago and I'm like, that's fully what I wrote it about. That like I really wanted to make something about, especially now, about finding little moments of sweetness. Like finding little moments of sweetness and feeling okay with holding on to them and not, you know, not dreading that they'll go away, not anxiously waiting for the next one, but just letting yourself sit in them, even though the world is what it is. And I mean, that's just such an oversimplification, but like basically just to say, whatever your circumstances are, joy happens and you can find it. There are like, sometimes it is like really impossible. I was having one of those moments yesterday. I went fully in. To anyone that's watching this who doesn't know me super well, I've had a panic disorder for years. And there is nothing more catastrophic feeling than a manic attack. You're like, there's never going to be anything good again. Like joy is gone, where like it's over. And you literally have to like either out loud or in your head tell yourself like, this is temporary, this is going to go away. It's, you know, it'll be half an hour, it'll be an hour, and I will be better. And that sort of feeling, that like not necessarily like clinging to joy, but knowing that it exists and knowing that it will show up at some points, and allowing yourself to just grab onto them and like enjoy them as much as you can, because it makes the bad stuff pass way faster.
Where's the name of this fragrance?
I'm calling it penny cakes. Penny cakes. I mean, specific, it's so funny. I mean, I love kitsch. Shocker. In case me being who I am isn't clear enough. But like, a honey cake is a Brazilian pastry. It's at Brigadeiro Bakery, they bake them, and they're one of my and my mom's favorite treats, and they literally are like little spiced honey cakes with Brigadeiro and chocolate in the inside. And the second, there's going to be another name for it, that I actually there was a much more serious name for it that was much more like heavy conceptual, a lot more like this is a perfume, this is like a, you know, a concept that's cool. And I think I talked to one of my friends who Bryson, who owns Alloy, and he's making a scent that is going to have almost the same name, and so is making a scent that sentence makes no sense, but is making a scent that has what the name of Honeycakes would have been.
Okay.
Yes. And so I just had to pivot. I was like, oh, well, I have to come up with something else. And my brain just went, you're calling it Honeycakes. Like, you're gonna be kitschy and cute and like be silly because that's who you are, and call it what you want to call it because it's cute and silly and that's what you want it. And I think making that decision really, like, I am cringe, but I am free. Yeah, like,
Joy is necessary.
exactly. And then like Honeycakes made me happy. It's kitschy, it's fun to say. It's like, and it just is what it is. And I think I'm starting to embrace that concept a lot more, just that things sort of be what they are and not trying to force people's hand quite so much. That was sort of what the exploration of Game Boy and Virtual was like, let's see how much I can explain and bring up so that people like really connect with it and understand it. And now I've both tested the like hyper conceptual, you know, supplement is like about loss and and also like it smells like a teenage girl perfume because that's what the scent profile is, because that's what it reminds me of. And then, you know, Virtual and Baby Boy are very like, it's about my life. And, you know, these sets represent this thing and this thing. That people were equally on board with both. And I kind of anticipated people feeling more strongly about one or the other. And once I realized that there is, not only is there space for both in the industry, but there's space for both in my own personal practice, it made me feel a lot more free to like sometimes just do silly things that are like not quite so serious. Like Honeycakes is not a serious name, and it's not supposed to be. I take the work seriously. You know, it's IFRA compliant. It's, you know, all the blending and aspiration will be done as it should be, but I hope that people giggle when they say the name. Like, I hope that it like, even if they don't like the scent, I hope that it just makes them chuckle because it's cute. That's like, if I can get people to feel that sense of joy through the concept alone, that's like more than enough for me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Bella. For those watching, can you let them know where to find you online?
Oh my God, where can you find me online?
And in person.
And in person. Oh, hi. I am in, any of you are in New York, I am always in New York and around, so hit me up because my studio will soon be available for hopefully studio sessions where I will be guiding people through scents and talking about my own collection. But I'm Noah Virgil. I'm Amphora Parfum. I am currently sold at Stowell in Williamsburg, the Locavore store on 6th Ave, and a bunch of places in Chicago. There's Apothecary and the Everything store, as well as Fab Lab in Stockholm, which is hello to Svensson, if you see this. All of them are on TikTok. I'm on TikTok as well. I'm on any of the apps that exist for however long they exist. And then probably we'll forget to delete the account, and then, you know, you'll find it like 10 years later when the app doesn't exist anymore.
We'll like hold that below.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Goth Fragrance Dialogues. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of fragrance and the incredible stories behind the scents that we explore. As always, if you want to learn more, be sure to check out the links in the description for more details and ways to connect with our guests. And don't forget to support their work. It's all about celebrating creativity and passion. If you're loving this content, regardless of what platform, please subscribe, that way you never miss out on a new episode. We've got more exciting stories, insights, and interviews coming your way. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Josh, your Goth Fragrance Bestie. Keep exploring the world of scent, stay inspired, and we'll catch you next episode.